Hello and welcome to a brand new Art of War series. Today we've got Deck Doctor. So this is a new series to go along with our Patreon, where our Patreon subscribers can send us deck lists and we'll go over them, do them up a little bit, fix things and try and focus them, and also give some advice on how to play the decks. So I guess we'll get straight into it.
Yeah.
So first up, massive thank you to all of the Patreons that have made a big jump in helping support the channel. So, massive thank you if your list is featured here today. Alright, starting off, we've got a Bravo list submitted by Hussey. So, he said that this was a control list, and that his main struggles were Dash and Prism. He came top 44 at Las Vegas Cooling.
Yep.
So, obviously doing very well on Bravo, but he just wanted some opinions on what to change.
Yep.
Yeah, so kind of our plan when we were looking at doing this list was we wanted to focus on control, because that's what he said was the aim of the deck. So we've just made a couple changes.
And this one's very Daniel focused,
yeah,
being our local Bravo expert.
Yeah, so basically the list is already very solid. There's only like a few things with this list that we'd like change.
Mm-hmm. The main thing that we saw was that he's called a control list, and it seems reasonably heavy on mid-range tools for Bravo.
Yeah.
So we've slowed it down a bit, tried to make it play more of a fatigue game, especially in the mirror.
Yep.
And just made it opt for that sort of play style rather than what it currently is.
Mm-hmm. So, I guess we'll start with the most obvious changes, which is the larger equipment suite.
Yeah.
So this is this basically, by adding the null rune, you've prepared for Wizard, which, depending on your local scene.
The two null rune split in the original list was reasonably interesting. With just having two says that you either think you need two for Briar, or that you're not sure which piece you should play. Certain matchups.
Well, you can sometimes need two for Chane if they're doubling down on like Sting of Sorcery effects with.
Well, Sting of Sorcery doesn't do anything, right?
Yeah, well, it can on things that already deal one arcane.
It's still a trigger. So you can block it with one.
No, you're right.
Yeah, it's for Rosetta, so you can actually destroy spellbound creepers. That's the only time it would ever come up in Chane.
Yeah, some chains do run.
They do, but I don't think it's worth running the extra null rune piece for. You'd rather have a 3-block from a Skullcap, for example.
Okay.
And also you have other ways to interact with that. You can just take another hit because you're already built to fatigue them.
Yep. The Rampart of the Ram's Head is really good at fatiguing Chane. Just helps a lot.
Yeah.
It makes it a lot harder for them they have to think more about breaking the chain. Like a lot of the times, if you are playing with a Ram's Head, it might not feel the best in a certain spot, but you actually, because it's there, the chain player has to alter their turn in order to stop you from getting maximum value. So even when you're not using it, it's accruing value.
Mm-hmm.
So that card is a bit of an all-star for that chain matchup.
Yeah.
And I do expect Chane to be a fairly prevalent deck going forward even after the ban, just because so many people have bought into the hero, because it was the previous most powerful deck, and it's still I think it's still a solid B tier aggro deck.
Yeah.
So
we've got the Ram's Head in there to help with the dash matchup as well.
Yeah.
And if those swings are not how you win dash, you don't want to slow the game down. So you'll want to be attacking with your big attacks. But then when you do defend, Ram's Head is exceptional at that.
Yeah.
So you're making the dash player take suboptimal items by going for Purifier early. And you're making it so you can actually block out those pistol swings and not leak too much damage before they get set up, which might give you an extra turn late game, and it might be the one domination
attack.
Yeah,
it can sometimes help you draw to your last pummel or whatever. It's still a very difficult matchup, especially for this control style. I think dash is probably the biggest caveat to playing very heavy control Bravo, is it's just going to be a very difficult matchup, kind of no matter what you do. So then we've just made a couple other changes to assist in the fatigue style of gameplay. So we've gone up to 2 Remembrance.
Yep.
So the main thing that Remembrance is really good for is keeping your threat density up in the late game. And this is super important against, like in the mirror match, where a lot of the time it's whoever can crippling crush more times wins.
Yeah.
So in those super long grinding games, having one more remembrance than your opponent, if your opponent's on one, can actually be like, 10% more chance of winning. Like, it can be really huge. So that's in there, so you can just recur your threats, and it's also good against those other decks that can actually try and fatigue Guardian by just playing an absurd number of cards.
Like Warrior or Brute.
Yeah, or even Bolton. Just because they can play, they play very few equipment, so they can play 75 cards main board, and if a couple of them are Remembrance, and you're looking at almost 80 cards, and if they are forcing you to block at the same time, then it can actually be quite hard to fatigue those decks. So having a second Remembrance really helps with those matchups.
Yeah. We cut one of the sigils. It's already playing, and we cut Red Blessing. So Red Blessing is a bit of a weird card in Bravo.
Yeah, it does what you want, but it doesn't at the same time.
Yeah, and it gets worse the more defense reactions you add. And typically the matchups you want life gain are also the ones you want defense reactions in. So you're reducing the consistency of the card by playing the game plan that it wants to play.
Yeah.
So when you want Blessing is typically when you're playing a more aggro style of the deck. So you can have those 3s and 4s in your deck to hit to gain 3 life off it the first time and guarantee an another swing.
Yeah, because it's a really because if you can guarantee you're relatively certain that you can draw a 3 resource card off the top, being able to two card gain 3 life, swing for 6 is like a very powerful tempo swing, and not a lot of decks can match that. So it's very good for forcing a pivot turn against those aggro lists. But in the control lists, you do actually run more of those flex 2 cost and less cards, so it just becomes a lot less consistent.
And if you want to learn more about how to play Blessing and Deliverance, I'm just going to shout out Cal McCreath's That Guardian Guy Facebook page.
Yeah.
He's written a very long write-up on when both Blessings are good, and I'd consider him much more experienced to talk about it than either of us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's I typically only play blue Blessings. I've been off red Blessings for a long time.
You play slow decks
Yeah.
as well.
So the reason blue Blessing is good is because you can actually pitch it for your attacks early game, and then
late game, when you have that high density of blues to draw into off it and guarantee
because you're going to be playing your defense reactions as you go through them, so your deck is going to naturally have a higher number of 3 cost and higher cards at the end. You're going to guarantee that 1 life and get 1 card, and it can also help with clearing bricks. Just being able to draw 1 card off the top can basically, because you're drawing 4 cards a turn, it can get you an extra card down, which can clear bricks. Which I guess is like a big problem sometimes for slow Guardian decks that, like say you've already played your Remembrances or you're not playing them in that matchup, as if you have like a stack of 3 reds on the bottom, you're going to draw back into those 3 reds eventually, and sometimes just being able to offset the draw by 1 can actually be quite big.
Other changes, we've added in Righteous Cleansing. I think it's very, very well positioned at the moment.
Yeah, this is
very good versus setup decks.
Yeah, it's a total medical, so it's another really big attack. So it just is a lot of damage. 10 is a big number, and being able to take a card from the top of your opponent's deck is often very relevant.
There's some decks where if you hit the right card, you just win the game on the spot.
Yeah.
For example, Bolton, if you hit a Lumina, suddenly you're not under threat of getting double or triple Lumina anymore.
Yep. Any item against Dash, Blood Rush Bellows versus Brute. I even got it off yesterday when I was playing in the Armory. I got it off against a Bravo in the mirror, and I was able to just cut a red pummel from his deck.
Yeah,
just like
one of the better cards.
And it's like that's one less pummel I have to deal with. Gone. So definitely a very powerful card.
Yep, and so we've got red Staunch Response there as well. You've never been a big fan of red Staunch Response?
Yeah, so I had to play a little bit with red Staunch Response when Warrior was like the deck, just to stop, overpower and those kind of effects because you can double pitch it to block 10. But it's a 2-cost card, so it doesn't trigger your effects. It's red, so it is like the epitome of a brick in some cases, and it can be very, very awkward. And often it just blocks too much. Like many, many matchups where you're just going, well, I'm losing 2 block on this card. So the blue, which we do play as a 3 of as a sideboard card, actually tends to do the job of the red in like a much more flexible spot.
The same with the unmovable blue, which we went up on 1 of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the blue unmovables stay in for every matchup because they're cost 3, so they're flexible for the hammer swings. The staunch responses come in for the decks where you're really blocking 5 is quite a crucial number. So I play them against Warrior, Ninja for the Surging Strikes, and some other decks as well.
Bravo.
Yeah, Bravo. But most of the time they'll come out to make the deck leaner, so that you can be a bit more consistent on your pivots.
Yeah, so I think the only other change that's really worth mentioning is probably went up 1 blue pummel. Just because pummel is a very threatening card in Bravo, and you can, like, a lot of the time it is telegraphed, but your opponent doesn't actually have the option to play around it.
Yeah. And you can always go down to 5 pummel if you don't
especially
feel
in
like
slow style decks.
Yeah. Pummel is quite often your win count into some of these, especially Dash. You want to play all your pummels versus Dash.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess we'll also talk quickly about Mangle.
Oh, yeah.
You hate this card.
I just don't think it does much, really. It's like, a lot of the time it is a 3-cost attack for 8, which is really strong, but it's also not, like, the most powerful thing you've been doing in Bravo.
Yeah.
So I'd rather shave it for other options, such as the Second Remembrance, or a Righteous Cleansing or something similar.
When I play the spots that Mangle is fantastic, is that it's like a really cheap way to push the issue at the end of a close game. So if you're going even with, say, Warrior, which can be a really hard deck to sometimes take an off-turn against at the end of the game, you can just with a 2-card hand push 8 damage, and that's when it's really strong. But with a deck like this, we should be able to fatigue Warrior no problem anyway. So we don't really need to push the issue. Our hammers are going to get there for us.
I also just am not a fan because, like you said, it's a 2-card hand that pushes 8 damage. That's also just Anathos and it doesn't cost a card out of your deck.
Well, Anathos is 6.
Yeah.
So that 2 more damage can be quite relevant.
It can be, but I don't think it's relevant enough to make it one of your red slots, which are quite tight.
Yeah. So that's overall the decision making behind it. But as much as I've said that, I do really enjoy myself some Mangle, and it frequently makes its way back into my decks, probably more out of habit than anything. So, I mean, if you love your Mangles, chuck them back in. So that's pretty much all for this deck. It's overall a very solid deck, and we only had to shuffle around some of the reds and some of the blues, but a very solid deck to start with. So, cool.
All right, moving on to Lexi next.
Yeah. Thank you, Hussey, for your submission. Okay. So now we have a Lightning Lexi deck submitted by Michael Thompson. So this list is it seems like an aggro list, but it's also got a whole bunch of like combo type cards, which we ended up cutting a lot out because
they're not very powerful on their own, and they need setup to get there. Yeah. But you don't really have the tools to set up in this list currently. You want to be playing a lot more defense reactions and filtering, such as Sink Below, Fate Foreseen, Whisper of the Oracle, these sorts of effects. To actually look for
those
multiple card combos, especially such as like Poison the Tips into three of a kind. Yeah.
It's just so difficult because you're asking for so much on these big turns, right? You need to have your 3 of the kind to start it off, because without 3 of a kind, these combo cards, Poison the Tips and Rapid Fire is what we're talking about, are pretty useless. And then if you have the 3 of a kind, you have the Poison the Tips, then you also need an arrow and then when you have an arrow, you also need an elemental card to fuse it with. So it's just asking for so much that we don't think you can reasonably get there.
So I think the biggest change we made in this list was switching the weapon from Shiver to Voltaire. So Shiver is very good at pushing on hits, but only on one attack. Like, you can't reuse things. So in this list, for example, there are things like Rapid Fire, to give all your attacks go again, and then Tome of Fendel, Blink as a combo to draw more cards.
Yeah.
Which is fine, but it's also, again, a 3-card combo to get you that card.
It's very cute.
That card count to actually push the damage through. And then Shiver's not actually doing a whole lot relevant. Like, Dominate on one of these arrows is not particularly useful.
Yeah.
Like, you guarantee 1 discard off Poison Tips maybe. But also if you play Voltaire, you guarantee 1 just by going wide on 3 or 4 arrows.
Yeah, and as you say with the Voltaire, you basically take Rapid Fire and you put it on your weapon.
Yeah, exactly. You get it every turn.
So the idea with this is we started off with like a very combo focused, magical land deck almost.
Yeah.
And we've trimmed it down, and we're trying to make it a very consistent lightning fast aggro deck.
Yeah.
So the main.
I think there is something to be said for maybe a combo type ranger, but you need to be playing a lot slower for it, and I'm not sure the shell is there yet. There's not quite the payoff that you get in other combo decks like a Blood Rush Bellows or a Luminous Ascension just in the game. Yeah,
so the kind of the shell, the cards surrounding the combo here are like very aggro cards, and to put a combo inside an aggro shell, it needs to like draw itself. It needs to start itself somehow along your main game plan, like very much like how Bolton works, where you just play aggro, you get some soul, and then you draw the Lumina, and there's your combo.
Yeah.
But with these multi-card moving piece combos, you need to very deliberately set up and play for them, and it's very hard to be aggressive while doing that. So
some specific cards we've added. Have cleaned up the elemental count. So you added a few more of the very good elemental things, like Heaven's Claw's Blue is a strong one just because you can arsenal it after fusing with it. And next turn you can flip it up and just attack for 3 with a blue, which is like not something you can do with many other cards.
And blocking 3 on an elemental card is a pretty useful effect.
Yeah.
So just when you have like an excess one, because a lot of the play effects on the other lightning cards are stronger, so you'd want to keep them. We went up and we cut some of the weaker lightning cards. So we cut Amulet of Lightning and Thunderstep.
Yep.
And they're just not that
and again,
impactful,
Thunderstep's
really.
an effect you just get by using Voltaire as your weapon.
Yeah, I guess those cards were in there for the Shiver to get that go again. But when you have Voltaire, you just have it for free, so you can go without the go again. You just get it already.
We've gone up on Take Cover, so playing some defense reactions in this one.
Yep.
I think you need it just to match other aggro lists and give yourself the edge. Especially having reload and like setting up your next turn is quite relevant in an aggro deck.
Especially for something like Ninja,
Katsu especially
because
very much punishes you for not having defense reactions.
Yeah, I mean any decks that like really force the issue and make you have an off turn are very difficult for Lexi to deal with because you do so little with a low card count. So any kind of deck that is going to do that to you, you kind of want some measure to be able to stop a good portion of their combo with one card. So that's what the defense reactions are for, especially like that red Gust Wave is like really useful to be able to stop with one card, especially when you have no armor as well. That's the Ranger conundrum. So we've added some other things as well. So we've added Remembrance, and this is a concession to the control decks. So,
and the fact that Ranger doesn't have a weapon to fall back on.
Yeah, exactly.
You have to have an attack to pressure your opponent.
So you can play the most aggressive Ranger in the world. You can have, 40 attacks in your deck, and you can hit a Bravo, and Bravo's just going to be like, I'm going to block you, I'm going to block you, I'm going to block you. And what will happen is you will run out of attacks, and they won't. And then you will die to ham swings. So you need to have those remembrances to get back those red frazzles, to keep the pressure on, and that way you should be able to have enough damage to kill the Bravo player. Yeah, so I'd probably have one Remembrance main deck, just so that people, so you don't lose if people just start 12 card blocking you. And then add more remembrances for the decks that's their game plan. It's just a full block you.
Yep. And then we've got one Caution in there. Haven't played this card much, but Lexi seems like one of the decks that can use it the most reliably. And you also use the effect very, very well.
Yeah.
Like, just the fact that your weapon turns it on, your tunic turns it on, you're constantly able to pressure with it.
Yep.
These are all things that Caution helps.
This is probably like our most questionable edition, because neither of us own this card. So we haven't played with it. But just reading it, it seems pretty strong, and this seems like the kind of deck that would make a natural fit. So
I know other top tier players are a big fan of Caution and Lexi.
Okay, yeah. So, if you own one, chuck it in.
Yeah.
If you don't own one, you can always go for like another arrow or one more flex lightning card or defense reaction. Just take your pick, whatever. Just play the deck a couple times and whatever feels light to you. Just use that last flex spot to bolster it.
Yeah, and then I think didn't change any other equipment, did we?
Oh, we added a bullseye braces.
No, that was already in there.
Oh, it was.
Yeah.
That's true. Okay.
And it just gives you that flexibility of knowing whether you want Heart of Ice or Bullseye Braces for different matchups. Yeah. And then we've got 2 yellow Lightning Press as just an extra way to push damage on a Lightning card.
Yeah.
It's quite a strong effect when you think of all the stacking on hits that Lexi can put together.
We think, Lightning Press is like one of the strongest effects in the deck, just because it
also helps your Prism matchup.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And just being able to, because the Lightning deck is very set on stacking Frazzle and Buzzbolt with like 3 of a kind, so that your attacks actually deal like 2 to 3 additional damage when they hit on those big turns. Being able to make them hit with a Lightning Press doesn't actually deal 2 damage, it deals 4 damage or 5 damage. So the card ramps up its usefulness very quickly. Thank you for your submission, Michael Thompson. Hopefully you got a lot out of that. And we'll move to
the last one.
It's the last deck. So the last deck we got was a Chane list post ban, and it's very interesting. And this one was a little bit more difficult to decipher. So
the first thing that jumps out is the large amount of one-offs.
Yeah. So there seems to be a whole lot of flex cards. And there are like the 2 obvious reasons that I think these could be in here are one for budget reasons, and 2 would be for not actually knowing what cards are that strong and just trying a whole bunch of different options out.
So one-offs aren't necessarily wrong, but they tend to be much better in decks that can either tutor them or are going to reliably see your whole deck.
Yeah,
which you are in Chane, but they also have to be blood deck cards if they're there for that reason.
Yeah.
And when you're playing cards that don't fit that description, such as in an aggro deck, you're playing, say, 15 one-offs. Some of these are going to be worse in other situations than others.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, why would you not just play a 3 of the one that's better then?
Yeah.
And because you can't reliably see them at the right time or cycle back to when they are good, I don't think you should be playing one-offs in that context.
Yeah, in Flesh and Blood, one-offs I think are a lot less common than in other card games, simply because tutoring is a fairly rare effect.
Yeah.
And also the
most common one you see is Katsu, for example, playing a lot of combo finishes as one-offs.
That's true.
With like a consistent tutor for it.
I think the other reason is that like the versatility of cards generally is quite high. If you don't want to play it in this match, you can just block with it. So there's not a whole lot of reason to run a lot of one-offs unless you have a very specific reason to. Like if you're playing Warrior, you can play 9 Warriors Valors, and that'll be fine for every matchup, A lot of the cards are just good enough to run 3 of. So we weren't really sure what direction this deck was trying to go.
So this deck definitely lacks focus. It's playing a lot of generic Runeblade good attacks, sprinkled in with something with like 4 defense reactions, 3 of them being Sigil of Suffering, 1 Sink Below, and then like Warmonger's Recital Red, which is not a particularly constructed playable card.
Yep.
It just lacks the rate that other similar effects have.
Yep.
Such as Nimblism, which would be a very similar effect in this deck, but I think more powerful. And then like Yellow Razor Reflex is missing the rate that cards need to be played in a competitive event.
Yeah.
So +2 for 1 resource is not strong enough, especially on a 2 block, to justify playing over other cards.
Yeah.
And then we've got Dimensional Crossroads in this list, which is a fine card. I definitely think it has a place in a deck. I'm not sure what deck.
Yeah.
But one where you're playing a bunch of blood debt attacks with not many non-attack sources of go again. It's probably not a deck I'd play it in, especially where you can't reliably trigger both sides of the ping.
Yeah.
So where it's strong is when you stack up multiple Crossroads and you can deal 4 to 6 arcane damage every turn by playing 2 cards out of Banish.
Yeah.
And that gets much harder with no seeds to play, and is definitely not where you want to be when your turns are going to be playing a generic card and then 1 attack from Banish or something similar.
Yep.
Because then you're putting yourself at a disadvantage to keep this aura around that does 1 damage per copy of it on the board.
Yep. And a lot of the times, it is optimal to take Blood Debt on Chane. There's a card that you really don't want to play this game, or
your red Riftbind is going to attack for 3 this turn.
Yeah, that's not a winning strategy really, especially if you're only dealing that 1 or 2 for it before you start having to make those bad decisions, right? So what we came up with for this list was that we would come up with 2 focuses and make 1 list around each. So we've come up with a aggressive chain list and we've come up with a combo chain list, just for whatever direction you'd like to take it in. So we'll start with the aggro list because I think it's a bit more simple.
It's very similar to what you might have been seeing through Monarch Constructed Season.
Yeah.
Minus the Seeds of Agony, obviously.
Yeah.
It's looking at pushing damage through good rates on generics and the ability to play with your extra attacks out of Banish Zone. And so for that reason, you're looking for lots of go again effects to make sure you can play all these attacks that you're drawing. And you want to play a solid amount of resource to actually get this all off. And then we've switched from Rosetta-Thorn to Nebula Blade.
Just for that early game value.
The early game value on Nebula Blade is insane. Also, mid to late game dealing 5 damage instead of 4 does make a difference. I say 5 because if it hits, it obviously makes a rune chant dealing that 5th point of damage. Yeah.
And 4 physical is quite often better than 3 and 1 arcane. Because
2 and 2 arcane.
Better than that, because the 2 and 2 can be blocked by 2 can be blocked quite easily with an equipment. And the 2 arcane can be used for a pitch card and also another effect. Like for example, you might have blue pitched against you, have double arcane buried, and then get shunted. Or especially against like Oldheim with the shield, he's gonna love pitching for those effects. So 4 physical is really hard to beat. So.
So other equipment changes, we've cut down on some of the null rune. I don't think you need to be that worried about Kano in any meta, really. It's going to be there, and you might lose to it occasionally, but just the amount of Kano players does not make it worth playing high amounts of null rune.
Earlier with the Bravo list, we have 4 null rune. It's much the same call. If you don't have any Kano players, cut them.
But also, aggro lists have a much better chance of winning versus Kano than a control player with no null
with
rune.
the Bravo, if you don't have the null rune, you're almost certainly going to lose. So it's a higher risk.
And then we've taken out Spring Tunic. You've got 3 options for chest plates. You've got Tunic, Iron Weave, and Carrion Husk. And Carrion Husk is the best when you're being you're forced to block versus your opponent, just because it's a 6 block sitting there the whole game. And Iron Weave is in general better than Tunic because you're playing 7 to 8 turns in the game before you deck. So that's 2 Tunic triggers, Or on Iron Weave, you can have that 2 resource on 1 turn, which is the same amount of resource, but you get all 1 block before you actually have to decide to throw it away.
Yeah, 2 resources an important amount for this deck because it is the exact amount your weapon costs to attack with. You know, just being able to add 4/5 damage at the end of a chain link with your equipment that blocks 1 is very strong. Also, being able to use it to chuck a Command and Conquer on the end, also very good. So just having 2 resource on a turn is very useful.
Yeah, so I'm just going to quickly call out some cards that we've added to this one to focus the aggro plan.
Yeah.
So Flock of the Featherwalkers has been seeing a lot of play for Go again. Tremor of Arathel, we're just looking at a good rate generic, so it's 1 for 6.
Yep.
And then we've got like 6 Plunder runs just to force that draw card through. 1 Gorgonian Tome because it's one of the better cards to play with Riftbind nowadays. It's kind of awkward, but it's still playable, I think. And then you have 3 Sting of Sorcery sitting there, which is one of the biggest draws to go wide aggro in Chane nowadays. Being able to get 4 pings off it maybe is very, very powerful. And one of the stronger cards to play in Chane now, honestly, because you can pitch it early game to fuel your early game turns. And in late game, when you're looking to finish the game, you're going to draw it if you pitch it at the right time. And be able to force through lethal on your opponent through arcane damage.
I think now Chane is going to be a lot more of like almost like a very hard deck to play, because you're going to want to pitch these cards that you're going to banish, but you also want to pitch cards that you're going to draw. And knowing what cards will be banished and what cards will be drawn, I think is going to be a major aspect of Chane going forwards, especially with Sting of Sorcery. Just because it's and Art of War, just because some of these cards are extraordinarily powerful when played from your hand.
My rule of thumb, if I didn't really want to think about it in Chane when I was playing it competitively, was you pitch your blues for the first 2 to 3 turns, and then you start pitching reds as aggressively as possible, because that's your banishes. That's kind of how the math worked out when I was sliding down to 60 cards, was that those first 2 to 3 to 4 turns, you're redrawing that pitch as your turn 9 or 8 draws, and you're flipping the rest of the deck, which is going to be your reds.
I'm sure someone could do the math a lot better than us.
But just off the top of my head, that was where it ended up.
Yeah.
And then we've got 2 9th Blades sitting there instead of 1, just helping your Prism match up a little bit.
Yep. We replaced Sigil of Suffering with Sink Below.
Yep.
So the reason for this is because you don't want to give your opponent decisions. So Sigil reads as a shunt that costs 0, that deals 1 damage. And you're like, oh, that's fantastic. But the fine text is that they can actually prevent that 1 damage, and then you're just blocking with a regular card at reaction speed, which is not really the effect that you want from a defense reaction, especially when you are playing a deck where you're very limited in your ability to run them. So if you had a whole bunch of defense reactions, then Sigil becomes a lot more reasonable. But when it's a effect that is for certain matchups, you're playing it for the 4 defense. You really need to guarantee that 4th defense.
So our sinks are in here specifically for Lexi and Katsu.
And these decks often have 1 resource floating. They might just have 1 on Tunic sitting there, or they make a Surging Strike for 5, 1 floating. You can't guarantee that 4 card block.
And if you have to block a Surging Strike, and you're giving them the option of getting that Katsu trigger by paying 1 resource, then you're looking at a losing position. So you really want to have that guaranteed 4 block when you need it.
The spot where Sigil is a genuinely epic card, pro gamer moment, is when your opponent has no null rune, and it is just one of the best defense reactions in the game.
We're seeing a lot less of that with Briar, forcing people back into playing null rune.
So I think Sigil of Suffering might become a meta-dependent card that, when null rune is really on the back foot, comes into the meta as a really powerful card. But at the moment, giving your opponent an option
there's enough decks that people should be playing 1 null rune. Between Chane, Briar, and Viserai. There's enough scary effects there, and enough of a percentage chance that you're going to run into at least one of these in a tournament that you should have 1, because it's a 1 cost slot.
I think it's probably going to get worse with time as well, because we're actually seeing some very playable equipment with null rune come out. We've got the Heart of Ice that's just come out for Guardian and Lexi.
Yep.
So, as more null room becomes available, I think this card is going to be a harder and harder sell.
And then, so for the other direction we've gone is the combo chain list, where we've changed the equipment around a bit. We've got the Ebon Fold there as the only helmet, and we've got the Spellbound Creepers instead of the Snapdragon Scalers. Just playing more into that, really trying to stack up a really, really big turn by playing a non-attack with Go again, possibly twice. So you're only looking to play it as 2 Snapdragon Scalers in this deck, where you're playing more of those 1 Arcane Pings to make that happen.
Yeah, so this is definitely the like build up your blood debt and have a few massive turns towards the end of the game to close it out.
Especially Riftbinds.
Yeah, this is the Riftbind focus deck. And this version is probably hurt more by the Seeds ban.
Yeah.
But I think it's still a viable deck and definitely a very fun way to play. And
there's definitely some mini combos to look out for in this deck, such as Dimensional Gateway into Tome of the Arknight. Setting up your top of the deck to draw them. I have a Fidia playing towards that, which you don't have to play, but it's there because it's a good blue that can also play towards your combo turns.
Yeah. It's there because it's a very powerful card. But...
And then a lot of cards that replace themselves, such as Dimensional Gateway kind of replaces itself. It puts one in Banish, which is almost the same thing.
Yep.
Sonata Arcanix to keep redrawing your hands. Art of War. And so you're looking... Gorgonia Tome and Tome of the Arknight. You're looking to play lots of cards in a turn.
To buff up those Riftbinds, right?
To buff up these Riftbinds and to play other attacks such as your Demigons, your Rip Through Realities. Just things that let you go much bigger on a turn than people can block and force the damage through that way rather than chipping through.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
Very much the Brute style of thought, right? Where you intimidate 4 cards and deal 20 damage
and
you don't do anything else.
Yep. This is definitely like the trying to like 1 or 2 tap people. And if you'd like to see like this kind of gameplay in action, we have actually played a few games on our channel with very combo oriented chains. Although
I was a big fan of the Seeds version for a while.
Yeah. Although those decks had seeds in them, I think you do get a very strong idea for how they should play and how you should be pitching. So I'd recommend watching a couple of those. I guess that's most of what we were going for. Yeah, so thank you, Dragon Pizza Punch, for your
and this was quite a fun list to talk about, because rather than talking about a reasonably optimized list and specific card choices, this is more about concepts when deck building, things you should be looking for, and how to focus your list towards that game plan.
This list strikes me much more like a newer player's build.
Or maybe someone who just has they have their old chain list and they're not sure what's going to be good in it, so they're testing them all out.
It's very experimental, I guess, trying lots of different things. I guess going forward, I'd also like to know, because I'm also kind of wondering if parts of this build are due to budget constraints. So maybe that's something we should include in the future. Let us know.
Also for things like this, feel free to send in what you want your deck to be. Would you like your deck to be an aggro deck, a combo deck? Would you like to control people out of the game? Definitely let us know where you're trying to go with your list and what your playstyle is. Because
definitely.
These are all things that help us build a deck for you rather than build a deck.
A good deck, right? And not everyone wants to play.
Are you looking for competitive play? Are you looking for take it and play with your friends, and they might not have all the Majestics, so you want to tone it down a little bit? We can build this towards this whole plan.
Yeah, exactly. This is meant to be going forward. This is supposed to be a tailored experience to you. So make sure you let us know what you're looking for. Or you can leave it up to us and try and tell us to go crazy. If you want something out of left field. So massive shout out to all the patrons that have submitted so far for this month. This has been a really fun series to make. Lots of interesting conversations have come out for it, and let us know some feedback for the video. And lastly, if you would like to have your list featured in one of these videos in the future, check out our Patreon. It should be in the description. And to sign up for the Deck Doctor series, you need to be in the 4th tier. So make sure to check that out.
The best tier, the Draw 2 tier. The only mode of Art of War that is always chosen.
The best one. All right. Thanks for watching, guys.
And we'll see you next time.